Friday morning, week 16. We're talking NFL, DFS, the entire Sunday slate. All coming up next on the RotoWire Fantasy Football Podcast. Happy Friday morning, everybody. Happy holidays, everybody. We are at week 16 of the NFL season, talking DFS. I am Scott Jenstad, joined as always by Ryan Belongia. If you could please rate and review the podcast, we do appreciate that. If you enjoyed listening to us all year, we appreciate some nice comments and the good stars. Helps people find the podcast, etc. We always want to give a quick kick to RotoWire. If you want to check out all the rankings and stuff, you can get a free 10-day subscription, rotowire.com/pod. Check us out there. Ryan, week 16, we got a massive game, not on the main slate. It's on Monday night, but by DVOA numbers, one of the better regular season games ever. But we're talking the Sunday slate. But first of all, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Excited for the holidays. Excited we have NFL slates on Saturday, Sunday, Monday.
Yep.
There's big soccer slates on all those days too. So yeah, it'll be fun. A lot of gambling, a lot of watching sports. Hanging with the family.
I like the hanging the family came third in your list.
Well, I'm excited to hang with family.
I know, I'm kidding. That's pretty awesome. Yeah, no, we had a Thursday night game last night, which actually the Rams look good. I've been talking on Twitter a little bit, but I don't think anybody wants to play the Rams week 1 of the NFC playoffs. Like if you're Dallas, Philly, the Niners, if they stumble, Detroit, one of those teams, like you did. I think that's the one team you don't want to play. But we've got 2 games Saturday, 3 games Monday. The NFL, since it's a Monday, kind of stepped on the NBA slate for Christmas. So we got 5 NBA games, we got 3 NFL games, topped by the Niners and Ravens on Monday night. Real quick before we get to the Sunday slate, give me your Niners Ravens pick.
I got to go with the Niners.
Man. I guess we can keep doing the rest of the podcast then.
Yeah, no, I feel like they're the best team in the league. I think the Ravens are a good team too, but I kind of think the Niners just pip them everywhere, just a little bit, especially if Purdy keeps it up. Do you agree?
I think a home game, so yeah, I think so. But it's going to be a really fascinating game. The Niners, the one thing they do struggle with is running quarterbacks, and Kyler gets a little bit loose on them usually, but Lamar is a completely different animal than some of the guys they played. He's awesome. So it's just it's going to be interesting because I think that if he gets loose, that could totally change up what they do. The Niners did not play the run well last week at all. Both Eric Armstead and Javon Hargrave didn't play. They're both questionable this week. If those guys don't play in the middle, that opens up the middle, and the linebackers, Warner and Greenland kind of have to go there. They did not play well last week either, which is rare. Fred Warner plays well almost every week. He was not very good last week. If they got to really pack that middle and then Lamar can get outside, that changes things. So I think that's the key thing is kind of how if they keep Lamar hemmed in like they did with Hurts. They played Hurts really, really well in Philly. They can keep him hemmed in. I think they win the game. If not, I think it gets to be a little bit more of a shootout. We'll see if the Niners can shoot out against that Ravens D, because the Ravens defense is pretty darn good. This is definitely a different beast than the Ravens D, so it should be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it. We got Warriors Nuggets during the day on Christmas, then Niners Ravens at night. So everybody get their presents open early because we got a lot going on that day.
Wow, yeah, 2 great games. I saw some crazy Purdy stat where he has the fewest passing attempts in the league, but the second most passing yards.
Yeah, I think it's like 29th when you get injuries and stuff. But yeah, it's like essentially last and essentially first. It's when you have a historic yards per attempt, good things happen.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun. I'm very much looking forward to that game. I think it'll be an interesting test. And the weird thing is, like, I know the Niners are up and the percentages all have them as the 1 seed, but like if they lose this game, they probably have to beat the Rams week 18 to get the 1 seed, because Philly ain't losing again with their schedule. I think they get the Giants twice and the Cardinals once maybe. I really don't want Niners Rams week 18 to be that big of a game, because the Rams are going to definitely need that game, so it's going to be full go for them.
Yeah, so big game for the Niners. I'm sure they'd love to rest some guys against the Rams instead of having to play for something.
Yeah, you want to play a half in that game, maybe get some guys out, that sort of thing. But let's get to our slate. We're talking the Sunday main slate. We've got 9 games on the slate. We mentioned there's a lot of kind of holiday games, 2 Saturday, 3 Monday. So we're down to 9 games, 6 early, 3 late, but still a lot of games. We have a massive game on the slate too. We've got Cowboys Dolphins. We'll start with that. We got 2 games that are high total games. Cowboys Dolphins 49.5. Lions, Vikings, 47.5. But Real quick, we'll obviously talk about all the players as we get going here, but Cowboys Dolphins is kind of an interesting game because both defenses are actually playing pretty well. The offenses, one's a little bit banged up. We got Devin Achane and Tyreek Hill questionable. I think both guys are going to play. And then we got Dallas, the offense, who's coming off an absolute laying of an egg last week against Buffalo. So weirdly, like, this is a lot of big name guys, a lot of high salary guys. But if you get into the numbers deeply, you could see a little bit of defense being played in this game.
Yeah, it's tricky. So I think James Cook and Buffalo ran for 266 yards on the Cowboys last week. Miami's been wanting to run the ball. I think that's what they're going to want to do here. So I don't know, you can see if it goes Miami's way that maybe these guys don't pay off their salary, but I think it's an interesting spot for Dallas. Clearly they have something to prove now after, you said it, laying an egg last week in Buffalo. That was really disappointing. But yeah, it's a tough matchup. Buffalo's defense is pretty good. Ramsey and Howard defending CeeDee Lamb. I was interested for your take. It's tough for me to get to Tua. You just look at the numbers, and he hasn't been throwing for a lot of yards. He hasn't been scoring a lot of fantasy points. I think he's only put up more than 25 fantasy points once since week 3, I believe. I mean, now they haven't been pushed that often, but they really play slow, Miami. And Dallas could bring it out of him. Dallas plays fast, but yeah, I don't know, Scott. I haven't quite decided on that game. My lean was to maybe take another shot on Dak, but it's kind of a tough matchup for him and CeeDee. I don't know. What do you think?
It's weird, right? Because you see the high total, you see all the stars, then you get into it. Like I said, and you're just like, oh, well, this is kind of a tough matchup for this guy, tough matchup for this guy. I think the theory on, the theory to play Tua would be you just hope that this turns into a shootout. I think that's what you're hoping for is, the teams get rolling. They can't play slow because Dallas keeps scoring. And I think that there are certainly paths where this turns into a shootout. There's so much talent on offense, the defense may not matter. Jonathan Hankins for Dallas is a big question mark. I don't think he's going to play. And, their run defense is completely different with him out of there. So you can see that. I mean, they hadn't given up a 100-yard rusher all season until last week. And Cook goes for 170. And Josh Allen doesn't even have to throw the ball because they're just running the ball so well. Reminded me of it's going to be a bad memory for you, but that Niners-Packers game, the playoff game where, Garoppolo didn't throw a pass in the second half. Everybody's like, oh, it's because Jimmy sucks. Well, no, it's because they're running 9 yards a pop. Why would you ever throw the ball? So, Buffalo had that rolling. But yeah, to me too, it's I thought at first this would be the game everybody stacks. But the you could kind of see the defense, and B, the top stacks are really expensive. I mean, Tua, if you want to play Tua, Tyreek, CD, that's the same thing. I mean, both CD and Tyreek are over 9,000 on DraftKings. And if you want to go with Dak, I mean, he's even more expensive. And then you want to go CD and Tyreek on the way back. So if you want to stack it, you got to have to figure out how to do it or find really cheap guys elsewhere. The interesting part is that there are no expensive running backs on the slate. So there's no McCaffrey. I think there's nobody under over 7,400 that they would play. So I think that if you wanted to spend a receiver, it's week you can do it. There's a lot of we'll talk about there's probably 3 running backs in the 5,000. I think you're going to be pretty popular as one especially. But there are a lot of ways to build this week, especially with no expensive running backs. But it gets expensive fast. And there's some other games I like. I think which kind of comes down to for me.
Yeah, me too. And like you said, I don't even think you can play Tyreek, CD, and then Dak or Tua. Yeah. It leaves you with, I don't know. Yeah, you'd have to really stretch to do it. So it's a tough game to stack. What makes it interesting is nobody's going to play Tua. And I'm not saying I want to, but this Tyreek Hill's ownership is going to be lower than pretty much any other week. Even Dak and these Cowboys are going to be under 10%. CeeDee Lamb might catch a little bit of ownership, but for the highest total game of the week and clearly the game that has the most potential to shoot out, it's not going to take on that much ownership. So that makes it at least interesting.
So I looked, and if you go Dak, CD, and Tyreek, and you put in a really cheap defense, and I'm just going with a really cheap tight end. You have
5K running backs.
You have, I'm looking at here, you have about 4,400 a spot for the last 4 spots. That's 2 running backs and 2 receivers. That is really, really tough.
That's really, really tough. Yeah,
And that's with essentially punting defense, and I've just put a Okonkwo on it. You could probably go a cheaper tight end if you really wanted to punt that, but either way, you're talking mid fours average for last spot, and that includes both running backs. We talked about those cheap running backs, but those guys are in the fives. Like it's just you're gonna have two receivers in the threes.
Yeah, you put in 2 5K running backs, it leaves you with about 3,000. So you're gonna need
even less, yeah.
2 3K guys and a 3K tight end. So basically 3 min punts. Like it just doesn't work. Like you would need massive ceiling scores.
Yeah, I put in 2 mid fives running back. It doesn't work. I think that it's possible physically, but it's almost impossible to get a team you remotely like playing Dak, CD, and Tyreek.
Yeah. And I guess
people will do it. People will find ways to punt, but I mean, you better really have some plays down there you love.
Yeah, I think a popular thing to do will be to leave the QB out.
Interesting. Yeah, I could see that.
I guess a little bit of a segue, but I think Nick Mullins is going to end up maybe as the most popular quarterback on the slate.
That's a good segue. Lions Vikings is the next game at 47.5. Talk to me about that game.
Yeah, so I think you're going to have the most popular quarterback in Mullins. I think Ty Chandler will be the most popular running back on the slate. He's 5,600 after a big game against the Bengals, and he had 26 touches for 150 some yards. And Kevin O'Connell came out and said he's going to be the feature guy. So yeah, I think Chandler will be chalk, and Justin Jefferson will be one of the more popular receivers. So yeah, there's really good plays on the Minnesota side. From like a game stack perspective, I don't think anyone's really going to play Lions. So that makes it kind of interesting if you would want to stack that game. I think there's some merit to stacking that game. You know, it's one of the few games in a dome. Lions games in domes have been great. The Lions have been really bad against the pass. And yeah, there's just a lot of value on the Minnesota side. So that game's interesting.
Yeah, I think so too. That was the game that as I was kind of looking, that was the one that there's one coming down low that I'd like to figure out, but I can't quite do it. But yeah, Lions Vikings was the one that jumped out to me. You mentioned the dome thing. Like Goff is a completely different player and outside and inside. I'll give you the stats later, but it's just he's fully different in those games. His stats inside are awesome, and his stats outside are just bad. So you never know game by game, but indoors, we mentioned before the Lions defense has not quite been what it has been the last few early in the season. Obviously, they were better last week. They played pretty well last week, but Goff had 5 touchdown passes. I think that you can Goff, Amon-Ra coming back with Chandler. I think could be workable too. That was kind of one of the first stacks that I built. It's hard to go Amon-Ra and Jefferson, although it's more doable than Tyreek and CD because they're both in the 8s and CD and Tyreek are in the 9s. But you could build that one too. I think that'd be one that would be a little different. I don't think people are going to play Amon-Ra and Jefferson together, although I think it's workable. Any other games down here? We have 2 games in the middle total wise. We have Colts Falcons 44.5, Cardinals Bears 43.5, and then we have a slew of games in the low totals. But before we get to those, either Cardinals Bears or Colts Falcons, what do you think? Either of those games that you like as a game you get to kind of get multiple players in?
Yeah, I think either of them. Seems like a great spot for Fields.
Yeah,
Fields
sure does.
DJ Moore and even
when I was doing it, I thought Fields was more popular than Mullins, but Mullins is so cheap, you might be right. But I think Fields, DJ Moore is gonna be pretty popular this week. Me
too. Yeah, and I think Fields, he will be one of the 2 most popular quarterbacks. I think you're right. It's just a great spot against Arizona. They've been getting crushed all year. You can run it back with Trey McBride, who looks like one of the best tight ends on the board. Probably the best, actually. Trey McBride's going to be popular. So yeah, I really like that stack, but yeah, it'll carry some ownership. Just real quick, Mullins and Jefferson versus Fields and DJ Moore. Like, does one of those jump out to you as clearly better than the other one?
I kind of lean Fields, DJ Moore, but yeah, I mean, it's Justin Jefferson. You can't ever rule this. The thing with Mullins is, and I think we talked about it last week a little bit, but like he's going to put up some stats. He's going to throw the ball to the other team too. Like I watched him for, I think it was 16 starts as a Niners quarterback, and like every game you're like, this guy might put up some stats, but holy hell, is he going to throw a pick 6 or 2? Like it's just he has some throws, you just like mind-boggling reads. And he did last week. Like he he had 300 yards passing at Cincy, but he probably lost them the game with those two picks. I mean, one in the red zone, one the falling down play that was just an absurd decision, absurd that it turned into an interception. Like he got really bad luck to have a horrible idea, but I mean that's Nick Mullins, and like it's maybe kind of a Jameis Winston Jr. where we kind of like that for fantasy.
Yep, no, I agree. That game was tough last week. No way they should have lost that game.
There were multiple teams in the AFC. Like Cleveland had no business winning that game, and Cincy, like Buffalo looked like they were going to suddenly be in great shape, but even before they played their game against the Cowboys, and all of a sudden Cincy pulled that miracle out. And Cleveland, like they were down 17-7, and I think and Fields had that 4th and 1, and it was like he had the corner. There's no way he gets tackled. And that guy makes an unreal play, and all of a sudden they score 3 times in a row, and they win the game. It's just it was a wild afternoon of teams kind of keeping their playoff lives alive.
Yeah, and Chicago still could have won it with that Hail Mary that landed right on.
I can't
on top of Mooney.
I can't believe Mooney dropped up. Like I know it's like in slow motion, it looks easy, but like in the moment, like everything's going fast. You're kind of flailing. So everybody's like, "Oh, they freeze it. How do you not catch this?" But man, it fell right in his lap.
It's tough. Yeah. So yeah, back to the other game, the Colts Falcons. I think it'd be a great spot for Jonathan Taylor, especially if Zach Moss is ruled out. I don't know what's going to happen with Moss, but
do you have any sort of feel that Taylor? I mean, it was a thumb, so it's not like a conditioning thing. But do you think they give him a full workload if he plays?
Yeah, I don't know. I do have some concern, but because it was thumb, like that's why you'd like Moss to be out. It was like I know they have other guys. I think Sermon and Goodson mixed in last week.
I couldn't believe Trey Sermon was a thing last week. That was crazy.
Yeah. Former 49er.
Yeah, nice. Solid 3rd round draft pick there.
But yeah, like it's a great spot for the Colts. This is, I believe, the biggest mismatch between a good offensive line and a bad defensive line. The Falcons' defensive line has been bad against the run. They rank 30th in the league, I believe. Colts' offensive line has been playing well lately. You're going to have Heineke back in there. So, yeah, it's a good spot for Jonathan Taylor. But you're right, some question marks around the workload. And then on the other side, be a great spot for Bijan Robinson if he's going to get touches. Last week he got 7 carries.
I played Bijan on my Stafford Cup Christian McCaffrey team last week. It absolutely – I was like, I'm rolling here. Bijan just murdered that team.
Yeah, I mean, just absolutely brutal. You never know what you're going to get with Arthur Smith. I'd like to believe back at home after, more criticism surrounding Bijan's touches that it'll be different this week. But again, there's a lot of risk there too.
New quarterback too. Do you think Heineke helps Pitts in London and those guys?
I'd like to think so, right? I mean, I think Heineke is a better passer than Ritter, right?
I do too. Yeah.
So yeah, it makes London interesting. Pittman.
Colts have had a league high 10 games go over the total this season. They are the best over under team on the over in the whole NFL.
Yeah, you could see this one back and forth, and a lot of players in this game project well. I didn't think Pittman, it didn't seem like Pittman would be playing after the hit he took.
Yeah.
But he's been practicing fully and seems trending in the right direction. He's going to project as one of the better receivers, and it makes sense he was on his way to crushing in that other game, in the game where he got injured. I don't know. So I might have some interest in Pittman. I don't know. Do you like this game?
I kind of do, but I'm trying to figure out how to play it. Like, I think there's going to be some points scored in this game, but Heineke kind of throws a wrench into it. But I think it's a good wrench. I think that I'm not a Desmond Ridder guy, and that interception he threw last week was so abysmal. Like, I saw a breakdown of it by someone. It's like, not only was it a horrible idea, but there's a guy like wide open on the other, like right next to whoever he tried to force it into. But yeah, I kind of do. I'm a little wary though on Bijan and Taylor, just because Bijan's workload, like he fumbled last week, and maybe that was why, and maybe Arthur Smith was like, "You fumbled, you're done." But I mean, insane to take out your best player because he fumbled. But they do happen. Didn't do it multiple times, but. So I find it as an interesting game, but I find and we'll talk about players, I find it hard to figure out exactly how to play it because Pittman's really good, but coming off that, he's got to clear the concussion protocol. I know he's practicing, but he still has to clear the protocol. But you're right, he was killing Pittsburgh till he got hurt. Like it was in 78 yards. And it was the second quarter. So yeah, I do like that game. I try to figure out how to play it more than anything. Real quick on the low total games before we get into specific players. We got Seahawks Titans at 41.5, Jaguars Bucks at 41.5, Browns Texans at 40.5. Every Browns road game has gone under. I think I read that right. Packers Panthers 37.5, Commanders Jets 36.5. Commanders Jets, worst two teams in the NFL since week 7. Both of them have a minus 80 or worse point differential. That is a horrendous football game.
Wow. Yeah, that's bad. Maybe a few players. I think the Jags Bucks game would be interesting if Trevor Lawrence plays. So I don't know. There's a lot of news.
By the way, I'm sorry. Every Browns game on the road has gone over. I had said that backwards. Every Browns game. So their defense has not been as good on the road. That makes sense. So their road games have gone over. The totals have kind of worked on the fact how good their defense has been. Their defense has not been as good on the road. But we got a Texans team that who knows who the hell's playing is the problem.
Yeah, I remember Minshew going crazy in that Browns game that had like 80 points in it or whatever.
Yeah. Any of these games, you're like, oh, I think this game's sneaky high scoring. Like, it's hard to. I think we got specific players on some of these games, but like Trevor Lawrence might be out for Jacksonville. That changed that game a lot because that could have been actually they could have been a high scoring one for me. Like, I like to attack the Bucs defense and the Bucs offense. I mean, Baker was dealing. Sorry about that in Green Bay last week, but man, he was awesome. Any of these other games interest you at all?
Yeah, I mean that one would. You're right. Baker was awesome. It'd be a great spot for Lawrence and the Jags passing game. Tampa's one of the best spots you can have. The Jags are going to have Christian Kirk's already out. Zay Jones is going to be out. So if Lawrence plays, great spot for Ridley, Evan Ingram, and even the rookie Washington. He'd be one of the better cheap values on the slate. Pretty good spot.
Can you get involved there at all if CJ Beathard is playing quarterback? Beathard 5,100.
Yeah, I don't think I'd get involved in. I just don't know if the ceilings would be there. But
as someone who watched CJ Beathard play in San Francisco, also the ceilings would not be there.
Right. So I'd probably X out Ridley and Ingram, but maybe because Washington's so cheap, he could still get to 17, 18 points or something with a touchdown. So I think he'd still be okay. But yeah. That would if that happens, Scott, I'd probably have most interest in Rachaad White. Most expensive running back on the board this week, which is pretty unbelievable.
You ever think we'd get there?
Never. I mean, it's unbelievable. But yeah, it'd be a great spot. Tampa would be sizable favorites at home. He's had 20 plus carries in 3 straight games. Yeah. That's without the receiving.
I remember like 3 or 4 weeks ago, we're like, Rachaad White's really on a roll right here. And then he's just, every game he's been consistently over 98 yards and 6, whatever the number is, just consistent every single week.
Yeah. He just keeps doing it. And, with the lack of no Christian McCaffrey on this slate, the uncertainty around Taylor, the 2 Dolphins running backs are the other 2 that are priced up there. So a 25-point game from a running back could separate you. So, yeah, I'd have some interest in White if that was the case. From these other games, under 40, you got any thoughts on Breece Hall? He projects okay, they're home favorites against a bad Washington team.
After last week, I'm kind of just off Breece Hall.
Yeah.
I kind of liked him last week after the week before. He was so involved in the passing game as they were trailing, and then last week they were trailing again, and he didn't do anything. It's so hard for me to do anything with this offense right now. I think there have been weeks we liked Garrett Wilson, and he was really good 2 weeks ago, but then absolutely laid an egg, last week and 30 yards or whatever it was. Yeah, Breece Hall had 2 targets last week. He went 9, 8, 9, and then 2 targets last week. He only played 23 snaps last week. I don't know if he got banged up or what happened there, but it's just I just don't think I want to play. I don't think I want to play guys on the Jets. I mean, there's probably against the Commanders, there's probably someone that's going to do well, but if you want to go Breece Hall or Garrett Wilson, go for it. But I think that's kind of I hate to say cross off game because I might play defense in that game, but I don't think it's worth trying to figure out what offensive player to use there because it's going to be too tough.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I see Zach Wilson just got ruled out, and Simeon's looked pretty bad. Yeah,
so who knows what you get there? I think you're going Trevor Simeon. Do I really want to put money on that one? I don't think so. But let's jump into specific game or players here and stacks, that kind of thing. But first, a note from our sponsors at Circa. Get ready for the ultimate big game parties at Circa Resort and Casino. Super Sunday is in Las Vegas this year. Watch the big game poolside at Stadium Swim's big game viewing party. A massive screen, booming game sound, a view of the pyrotechnic and visual effects throughout the game. Snag the best seat in the sun with day beds, poolside boxes, cabanas, and more. Or you can touch down the world's largest sports book, Circa Sports, for the big game bash. 3 stories of football glory featuring a 78 million pixel screen. Book your seat with a variety of reservation options, including bottle service, open bar, stadium-style food, and more. Don't miss these legendary viewing experiences on February 11th. The big game party is only at Circa Resort and Casino. Reserve today at circalasvegas.com. So, Ron, I want to jump right into quarterbacks and game stacks here. I think that, as we get into guys here, we'll talk about some popular players, but we talked a little bit about Miami-Dallas. I think it's a game with a lot of big-name stars. If you're playing one of the quarterbacks from kind of your feel earlier, sounds like you're playing Dak over Tua, but talk to me about the two quarterbacks in this big, high-profile, high-total game.
Yeah, my lean was to play Dak. I don't really want to play either of them, so it's kind of tough for me to sell it.
Miami's been really good against the pass since Jalen Ramsey got back.
Right. They had that one game 2 weeks ago against Levis and the Titans where they kind of blew it and Hopkins went off, but that was a little bit fluky. Yeah, so I kind of want to play CeeDee Lamb, but like you said, they have Ramsey and Howard. Both will be on CeeDee at different times. I know CeeDee lines up everywhere and pretty much nobody can cover him, but still it's a tough spot. And I do think Miami wants to slow the game down a little bit. They'd love to get a lead and run the ball. There are paths to it shooting out. I think that involves Dallas starting off well and building a lead. So I don't know how that necessarily works for stacks. I worry about Tua's ceiling. I know, he could get into a shootout and throw a lot, but even still, I feel like those running backs vulture so many touchdowns when they get close to the goal line. I don't know, Scott. I think my lean is Dak, but it's expensive if you roster him with C. I mean, what do you do? Dak, you can't play Tyreek then, or you have to fade CeeDee. I don't mind that. Maybe you play Dak, Ferguson, and Tyreek or something. I don't know. I'm kind of lost what to do with this game. What do you think?
Even Dak, CD, and Waddle is really expensive. I mean, Waddle's $2,500 less than, or $2,200 less than Tyreek. So maybe you could try and do that. Dak Ferguson's probably the way that I would go. It's interesting you said that because I think if you're going to do it with Dak, that you probably fade Lamb. But man, Lamb's the best receiver in targets, yards, and touchdowns in the second half of the football season. So if you're going to play Dak, I think you have to play CD. You have to go cheaper elsewhere. You could go with one of the running backs, I suppose, in the sevens, but who do you pick there? The crazy stat with Miami defense, we've talked about how they've been really good. They've given up 3 touchdown passes the last 5 games, which is a crazy stat. But here's the quarterbacks they faced in that stretch: Simeon and Zach Wilson, Will Levis, who had some bunch of yards but only 1 touchdown, Sam Howell, Tim Boyle, and Aiden O'Connell. Suddenly that comes into effect. They don't give a passing touchdowns to those guys because nobody gives a passing touchdown to those guys. Maybe Sam Howell, but if you scroll back a little bit further, you go Mahomes had 2, Mac Jones had 2, Jalen Hurts had 2, and they faced Bryce Young and Daniel Jones, Tyrod Taylor, and then Josh Allen had 4 against them week 4. It's scrolling way back, but they've really faced a lot of weak quarterbacks. Obviously, Mahomes jumps out there. He only had 185 passing yards in that game, so they have played really well. I keep trying to talk myself into a way to get to this game, and then I keep running into stats that I don't like. Tua has been a top 12 quarterback only 2 of the last 6 weeks, 3 of the last 8. Cowboys lead the league in pressure rate. That's the one thing that is a problem for Tua. Last week they got the ball out of his hands so fast. McDaniel really, really built that game plan really well. But that's not as easy to do against Dallas. They're going to get pressure on the quarterback. He's got to step and throw. And I worry about that with Tua because any pressure and their offense totally changes. I don't think I'm going to play either quarterback in this game. It's kind of what it comes down to, which is scary when you've got the high profile, high total game. But I think I just like quarterbacks elsewhere, to be honest.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. And it makes sense to play a cheaper quarterback. You can just afford so much more.
So right below those guys, there are two quarterbacks I do like. We have Justin Fields at 7,100. We have Jared Goff at 6,900. From talking earlier, it sounds like you're in on Fields. Tough game last week, but it was against Cleveland. I think you kind of tossed that out. I obviously watched the Niners-Arizona game. Arizona gets no pressure on the quarterback, and Fields is really good when he has time. When he has time to throw, time to run, he becomes really dangerous. I think this is a great matchup for Fields.
It's a perfect matchup. You said it. Arizona doesn't have a sack in the last 3 weeks. They just
Purdy just stood back there and threw. Like and the Niners' offense is a different than most, but like Arizona put no pressure on them.
Right, and I know Fields is a polarizing quarterback. I actually like Fields. I still think he has potential to be a top quarterback. Maybe a little bit of a hot take here, but I don't think he's that far away from being like a Jalen Hurts type. He's not there yet, but I think he has that type of ceiling.
That's a fairly warm take.
Yeah. I've seen the Bears have looked better in the last month, and this is about as good of a spot as they're going to get. So I know it's going to be popular, but there are ways to get different. Really like a Fields DJ Moore stack. Yeah. You should talk about Goff though, because that one from a leverage point of view probably makes more sense.
Yeah, it's just you. I mean, he obviously had the huge game last week, 278 yards, 5 touchdowns against Denver. You look at his indoor games, he has an 8.1 yards per attempt and 21 touchdowns in 9 indoor games. Outdoors in 5 games, 6.5 YPA, 5 touchdowns total in 5 games. He's a different player indoors. Minnesota's been good versus quarterbacks, but it's an interesting spot. They blitz a lot. If you get there on Goff with the blitz, he gets trouble. But if they pick up the blitz, he kills the blitz if they don't get there. So if you're going to blitz him, you better get there. And it's a weird mix, too. Like, they play a lot of cover 3 and a lot of cover 2. Goff sucks versus cover 2, but lights up cover 3. Amon-Ra also, like, lights up cover 3. So it's a weird mix of, like, he does some things really well against what Minnesota does, some things really poorly. I just think indoors, I think Detroit kind of hit a reset last week. I think that they're gonna play better. They really had a lull there for a while. I also think this game can get back and forth. I think Nick Mullins can do enough to pressure Detroit, maybe get a little bit high-scoring game here. I just think it works really well because everybody's going to play Fields. A lot, and everybody. I said there's going to be a lot of Mullins, but I think a lot of people are going to play Fields, and then you go just $200 cheaper, a much lower owned Goff. I really like this game. I like playing Goff with Amon-Ra. You can play Goff with Laporta. There's different stacking options there. He's got a running back in Gibbs who can take any swing pass to the house. I just like the mix here. I think Lions Vikings is a game that I want a lot of parts of.
Yep, me too. Just Gibbs. Hardly anybody's going to play Gibbs. I think that's a great leverage play this week, given his ceiling. Same with Laporta. After 3 touchdowns with Laporta or from Laporta last week, pretty much no one's going to click him now that he's the highest priced tight end. That game just makes so much sense, especially if you want some exposure to the popular Vikings pieces like Chandler.
Yeah, I think the interesting, and you could go. The thing with Goff is you can play Chandler on that one. Like you want to get different. In if you play Fields and Moore, it's hard. Maybe you don't want to go Chandler because they. I know it's a different game, but maybe this can be too popular. But if you go Goff and Amon-Ra, Goff and Laporta, I think you're different enough there. You can easily play Chandler, and it kind of locks right into that game stack pretty nicely too. I think you can play Goff on one of the receivers and Jefferson too. You can get there with the Goff's a little bit cheaper than the top quarterbacks. Amon-Ra's cheaper than the top receivers. That's a stack you can't get there with it. It works better than the Dak CD Tyreek, which we kind of proved before doesn't really work. What about cheaper quarterbacks? You mentioned Mullins. Before we get to Mullins, Baker Mayfield was awesome last week in Lambeau. 381, 4 touchdowns, perfect passer rating. First time ever a visiting quarterback did that in Lambeau. Jacksonville, who they play this week, has allowed a top 12 quarterback in 5 of 6 weeks. Jackson was allowing 8.4 yards per attempt last 6 weeks. This is a good spot. I really would prefer it if Lawrence was playing. I think it's to be a fun game back and forth. But can you get to Baker at all at 6,000? He's got good weapons now. Rashad White out of the backfield, Evans and Godwin. Godwin's woken up the last 2 weeks. Can you get to Baker at all, kind of in the mix between the top guys and getting down low to Mullins?
Yeah, I could get to Baker. I agree. I'd like Lawrence to play.
Me too. And I don't think he's going to, unfortunately.
Yeah. Doesn't seem like it. So then it seems like it would be harder for Baker to get there if the Jaguars can't, keep up. But he's only $6K, so he still could get there on efficiency. They should have plenty of good opportunities in that game if Lawrence is out. I think I have some interest in in Evans and Godwin. So
I like Edwards. Just play them both together and Edwards. That's perfect.
Yeah. I think both those guys are good plays this week. I don't think either is going to be too popular. So I think that stack makes a lot of sense.
So talk to me about Nick Mullins. He's down here at 5,300. You mentioned before you think he's going to be the most popular quarterback. 303 yards, 2 touchdowns last week. You mentioned the 2 crippling turnovers. That's the Nick Mullins experience. We know it well. The Lions have struggled the last 8 weeks against quarterbacks. They've allowed a top 12 quarterback in 6 of 8 weeks. They allowed 8.2 yards per attempt in that stretch. Do you like Mullins? Just the cheap factors, a little bit of both. Where do you fall with him? I assume, do you stack him with Hockenson? Do you stack him with Jefferson? What are you doing in the lineups you're playing Nick Mullins?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. He can sling it a little bit, and he's cheap. And the Lions, you mentioned it, haven't been great. Yeah, they have the 3rd worst graded pass coverage in the league this season, and it's led to quarterbacks having big games against them. It's a tough one. Last week, Mullins was on that little 3-game slate where it seemed like no good quarterback options. Well, Goff ended up being a great quarterback option. But anyways, I ended up talking myself into Mullins after a lot of debate. He was only $5K, and I was really happy about it for a while until Goff went and threw 5 touchdowns. But again, I think the question for a lot of people, just cash games, I think Fields and Mullins are for sure going to be the most popular quarterbacks. And it's an interesting question of, do you play like a Fields and DJ Moore, or you can play Mullins and Jefferson, and then you have $600 still. It's a tough question. I don't know. I think, he's good value for 5,300 Mullins. So, he doesn't need to do a lot, especially in cash games. Like, if he gets you 20 points, that should be good. Unless you see like a 40-point ceiling from Fields or something. I like Mullins, but I kind of leaning Fields at this point. I don't know. I don't necessarily think there's a wrong answer.
I think Mullins gets there as long as he plays the whole game. But I do think there's a benching risk with him. I think he could throw 2 bad picks in the first half, and they say like, hey, let's just check out what we have with Jaron Hall here. That is the only risk to me. I think if he plays the whole game, they're going to throw it enough. He'll chuck it enough. He'll make enough plays that he gets there. I think there is a small benching. It's a small risk, but it is a real risk with Mullins. I think a couple bad picks, they could be like, okay, this is
that's a good point.
I know they've said everything publicly. He's our guy right now, but I think that the 2 bad picks were bad last week, and there was like some murmurs like, we get him out of here. I think 2 bad picks early. They get down Detroit. They could do that. I don't think they will, but like that's the one little lingering thing in my head with my one concern with Mullins that there is a bit of a benching risk.
Yeah, that's a good point. Not that this comes into it, but he had 2 of the worst QB sneaks I've ever seen last week. Could have won the game with.
Those are horrible.
Those were horrible. I have no idea. Yeah.
I like take that play out of the playbook. Like let's like not run that. Those are terrible. Like he took a step back, and when he dropped, like I was like, "What are you doing?" It was so bad. Last guy here before we jump to running backs. Joe Flacco is 5,500 in this range. I didn't think we'd be talking about Joe Flacco in Week 16, but here he is again. Multiple touchdowns in all 3 of his starts. He has 311 and 374 the last 2 weeks. Amari is playing really well with him. Houston is better against the run than the pass. This matchup's pretty good. They've allowed over 8 yards per attempt since Week 7. I assume nobody will have Flacco because people will have Mullins, maybe some Baker in this range. Can you get to Joe Flacco at all?
And I don't know if I can, but I think he's a really good play. Yeah, just based on everything what you said.
In late in the season, weather affecting games, he's indoors. I wish CJ Stroud was playing it would maybe like a little more of a shootout. But Case Keenum might be able to throw up a couple stats. I kind of like Flacco 5,500. I think that a lineup with him instead of Mullins gets pretty interesting to me. Is it just kind of a leverage play against someone who is going to be popular, but we're not that sure Nick Mullins is going to be good.
Yeah, you're right. I might be able to talk myself into getting there. Yeah, I don't know. It's a pretty good spot against Houston. You're right. You really like Stroud to play.
Yeah,
but Flacco's been throwing it well, and they're never really going to have much of a running game.
Throwing it a lot.
Yeah, and he's been pretty impressive, to be honest. There's been so many injuries to quarterbacks this season, and we have rookies in there and backups in there, and it makes Flacco stand out as one of the few guys who can actually throw it around. And his pass catchers can put up stats, which, is crazy. I think it's a good I think it's a good option. It's a great matchup against the Houston defense that's better against the run. Do you pair him with Amari, or do you chase Njoku after that massive game? 2 massive games in a row from Njoku.
It's the wild thing with Flacco is you have multiple options to pair him with. Like, I think both work. I'd probably go Amari. He's really feeding Amari the last couple of weeks. I think that's probably where I go. Amari looked good last week too. But yeah, Njoku looked like a monster. Like, he's making big plays at key points and catching the ball over guys and running over people. Like, Njoku looks like the guy we thought he'd be 4 years ago when everybody wanted to draft him, whatever it was 3 years ago. That's a weird thing with Flacco is you can play with multiple guys. Like, I never thought we'd get there with this offense, but here we are. Let's jump into running backs. First note from our sponsor, Odds Are you ready to revolutionize your sports betting approach? Begin with a 2-week free trial at oddsr.com. That's ODDSR.com, where cutting-edge AI technology sharpens your edge in the betting game. Benefit from our proven 2-year track record, boasting a 60% accuracy rate and an impressive 10% ROI. The Odds Are AI meticulously sifts through extensive data to reveal high-value, green-value plays, guiding you towards smarter betting decisions. And it's not just about numbers. The Odds Are app is exceptionally user-friendly, crafted to be your go-to betting advisor right at your fingertips. Jumpstart your journey to betting smarter and more successfully. Simply visit the iOS or Google Play Store, download the Odds Are app, and step into a world of confident betting. Your path to a more strategic betting experience starts with a 2-week free trial. Download today, where smart strategy triumphs over luck. Oddsr.com. Let's talk running backs, Ryan. Weird running back week. We mentioned earlier, 7,400 is the most expensive running back on a full slate, like a 9-game slate. That is pretty wild. We have Rachaad White, 7,400. We have the 2 Miami guys here, 7,300 for Raheem Mostert, 20 touchdowns, crazy stat. Devon Achane, 7,100. Jonathan Taylor, 7,200. Jahmyr Gibbs, 7,000. Those are the guys over 7,000. Who do you like most? What are you doing here? It's a strange week when these are the top 5 guys on the slate.
Yeah, it is. For cash games, I think it's pretty straightforward. Rachaad White projects the best out of these guys, seems the safest out of all these guys. Obviously, he has the best role and a great matchup. So I think Rachaad White will be relatively popular in cash games and tournaments. I think a lot of people will probably just start Rachaad White, Ty Chandler.
Yeah.
Just skip down to Chandler for a second. He's going to be the most popular running back in all formats, I would imagine. He's a lock for cash.
I think it's an exceptionally large percentage. Are we talking like we're not talking obviously Zach Moss a few weeks ago, but like in the 40s and 50s cash game kind of percentage?
Yeah, in cash games, I think more than that. But in tournaments, it won't be like as crazy as the Zach Moss stuff. We have a couple other cheap running backs. I think in cash, it's probably just a no-brainer. But back to those top guys, I do have some interest in Gibbs for tournaments because I think he has a ceiling and he's not going to be owned, and we like that game. Those Miami guys are just so tough. I think it could be an okay spot for one of them after we saw what James Cook did. I don't know if that was an anomaly or if that could happen again. I know Mostert's been missing practice, but I think he's fine. They called it veterans rest or something. Yeah. But so it seems like both those guys are good to go. I never really know which one to pick. Taylor, I think Taylor's an interesting option for tournaments. Yeah. I don't know. What do you think about that range?
I like White the most too. I think it's a tougher matchup. Jacksonville's pretty good against the run, but I mean they're bad against running backs out of the backfield. He's been doing that well lately. 108 yards per game in the last 9 games. He's been really good. Not only in terms of like the eye test and how he's looked, but then the usage has been really good. They let him touch the ball. That offense is rolling right now. Obviously, they played really well last week. I like White there. I have a weird Devin Achane vibe this week. I think McDaniel's going to figure out a way. Their offensive line's beat up, which concerns me against Dallas's defensive line. But I think they're going to figure out a way to get Achane the ball in space. He only has 12 touches in each of the last 2 games, but he still does a lot with those touches. I think it's like 63 and 71 yards, like always effective. I think we see a big Devin Achane play this week. I think he will be very, very low percent owned.
Yeah, I think that's a good call. Does he get enough touches to put up a ceiling? I don't know, but you're right. He might not need that many if he hits some big plays.
It's a risky tournament play. He's a guy that could get 10 touches and 50 yards, and you're like, oh, this is terrible for the price. But man, I think that I think in this game, as we talked about, it's tough to figure out exactly how to play it. But there's got to be points in this game. There's too many talented players. I think he's the guy who's going to get the ball in his hand. I do like him this week. Jonathan Taylor, you mentioned, is a tough one here because I think if he was fully healthy, that'd be kind of the automatic guy here at 7,200. But my stat still holds: no rushing touchdowns against Atlanta all year long. It's there's still no running back who scored a rushing touchdown against. We told me like 3 weeks ago as kind of a joke, like I can't believe this is happening, but every week it's still no one keeps scoring. I think I need Moss to be out. You mentioned that earlier, but 7,200. Taylor fully practiced yesterday, Thursday. I think that he has the highest ceiling of this range, but I think I prefer Rachaad White. I think I'm going to go Achane over him too.
Yeah, I like that. I can't believe that stat still about the Falcons. Like, is anybody going to score on them this season?
Like at some point, get to the 2-yard line, just run the ball, just kill that stat.
Right. I mentioned too, like their defensive line grades out pretty poorly. Like this is supposed to be a pretty good spot actually for Taylor. But yeah, I don't know. They've been decent enough, I guess.
So the interesting range, I think, this week is this 6,000 range. We talked about there's some guys in the 7s that we do like. I think people are going to have Taylor and White. People are going to have some of the Miami guys, although I think Achane will be pretty low. But there's some guys in the 5,000s. We'll talk about them in a second. There are 3 names in the 5,000. I think they're going to be relatively popular, with Chandler being easily the most popular. But that leaves the 6,000 range. You mentioned before, you think a lot of people are going to just go White and Chandler and kind of move on. I do too. So this 6,000 range becomes a range where I don't think anybody's going to jump into this heavily. We've got Derrick Henry, 6,800, coming off the most inefficient game in the history of the NFL. And I say that with complete facts. Lowest number of yards ever for someone who had 20 touches in an NFL game. He had 10 yards total. That is an insanely awful game, but a great matchup against Seattle's run D. Tony Pollard, 6,700. Travis Etienne, 6,600. Aaron Jones, 64. Bijan, 63. Kenneth Walker, who looked awesome on Monday night at 62. These are guys that are big names, bigger names than the guys above them, at least to start the year. These are all guys who have been in the 7,000s in their career. These are guys who have put up big games. Can you find someone in this range that you really, really like to play at a low percentage, high talent guy that'll work out in here? I think someone's going to find someone in this range and he's going to win tournaments this week. I think it's going to be the range that someone's going to pop big, and whoever has them is going to win.
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm not sure who that is, unfortunately.
I'm not either.
I do think the popular construction for cash games will be 3 running backs. I think.
Okay. Two guys in the 5s with White, or a guy in here with White?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Unless you always get a few people click Bijan. He has a good projection. He's down to 6,300. So I think he might end up being the most popular in this low 6K range. I think people will still click on Breece Hall for the matchup. Kenneth Walker did look pretty good, and nobody's going to play him here against Tennessee. It's not the greatest matchup, but I get it. I don't know. Like I'm having trouble. Like Etienne, I don't really want to click Etienne if Lawrence doesn't start.
Etienne's been quietly really bad too.
Yeah, he has.
He's one of those guys. If he doesn't score, he gives you nothing. Like he has over 56 yards once since week 5.
Like I feel more likely to drop down a little bit more. Chuba Hubbard is going to be relatively popular for 5,700 at home against the Packers. I could see people landing there for cash games. There's another 5K guy too. I don't know, Scott. Give me the 6K guy though. None of these guys like jump off the page for me.
Yeah, I can't play Derrick Henry. I know that he has the 2 touchdown upside, but if Levis might not play, great matchup, but he looks so bad this week. I just don't know if they're going to ride him. They're out of the playoffs essentially. I just don't know if they're going to are they really going to feed him 28 times, which is what you need when you play Derrick Henry? He's awesome when he does that, and he just wears teams down, but I can't get there. The one guy I do like this week is Kenneth Walker at Tennessee. He would not be this cheap if his Monday night stats had been in there. 6,200, he looked really good too. Like he was cutting, and that touchdown where he wound around the defense and scored in the corner was awesome. 112 total yards. Most important thing to me is like he had been splitting. He split carries the week before with Charbonnet when Walker came back off injury. He had 85% of the backfield touches last week. Like they needed that game last week. They need this game this week. The Rams have already won this week. Seattle really needs to keep pace with them in the wild card race. Tennessee, while the matchup doesn't seem as good, they've allowed a running back 1 in 5 of the last 6 games. Devin Singletary had 170 total yards and a touchdown on them last week. And that would have been more if the touchdown in overtime had counted. Like he had a big play in overtime. He got called back before Houston ended up winning the game late. But I like Walker a lot at 6,200 this week. Gino's going to be back. I think that helps the cause too. I know Drew Lock had that drive last week, but obviously give me Gino there. I think Bijan right 6,300 helps that people kick him or Breece Hall instead. I really like Walker a lot at 6,200. I think I'm going to play him a bunch.
I'm sold. I'm sold. Yeah. So many good points there. Bijan and Breece Hall will be more popular above and below him. I might get Tannehill starting for the Titans, which I don't know.
I have no idea if that's good or bad. Talk to me. You're the Packers fan. Talk to me real quick before we jump out of this range about Aaron Jones. If AJ Dillon's out again, they eased Jones in last week. He only had 29 snaps, but he had 19 touches on those snaps. So like when he was in, they gave him the ball. I know Carolina's kind of weirdly good against the run lately. They're a weird team to figure out. Like they play pretty good defense, just horrible offense. Should be a good game script. You think that the Packers, they're 5 point favorites in this game, should have the lead even on the road. Can you get to Aaron Jones at all, who's obviously a talented guy for 6,400 in a good game, in a good matchup, game script, etc.?
Yeah, maybe. I actually think it's a pretty good play if Dillon is out. A good play if he sees 20 touches for sure. And you have all the Packers receivers banged up. It seems like Watson's going to miss again. Reed hasn't practiced yet this week. Yeah, if Dillon's out, it's a great matchup. I've tried to attack this Carolina team with quarterbacks and receivers in the past, and that just doesn't really work.
They slog games down. It's just every game with them is ugly.
So it just it makes me lean towards Jones. I think that's another really good call. I think
I like Walker and Jones in this range, and I don't think anybody really is going to play them.
No, and that's like the number one reason to play them, and they may even be better than the like just better plays than the options that are going to be more chalky.
I think flipping the White Chandler backfield to a Jones Walker backfield for essentially the same price as a couple $100 off, I think is really interesting, especially in a tournament.
Yeah, that's a great call. Honestly, I'm going to look into that. That's a great way to stack. That's a great way to use a Fields, DJ Moore, Trey McBride, chalk stack. Yeah, that's
my answer to the chalk stack. I was going to say it again is to switch up those running backs, and you get two guys in the middle range, and you don't play the high guy or the low guy. I think it works out really well.
Yeah, I love that call.
Real quick, I want to jump to receivers, but we talked about the three running backs that are down here. Chuba Hubbard's 5,700, another 24 touch game. Ty Chandler's down here, obviously off the huge game. He's 5,600 against Detroit. Tougher matchup this week. Detroit is pretty tough against running backs, but he had 96% of the backfield touches. I don't think Madison's going to play, but even if he does, I think they go to Chandler, but I'd like Madison not to play, just to make it even easier. And then Devin Singletary, mentioned him. We were talking about the game against Tennessee, 5,500. He had 30 touches last week. He had 170 yards, and that one touchdown came off the board. Dameon Pierce is not involved at all. I think he has 5 touches in 2 weeks. The Browns are kind of middle of the road against running backs, kind of middle of the road against yards per carry and running back points per game. So they're really good rushing the passer, but you can kind of get there. But Singletary is over 100 yards rushing in 3 of 6. He's been really heavily used. 3 guys down here. I think they all have some ownership. I assume Chandler's your favorite, but talk to me real quick about these 3 guys.
Yeah, if without taking ownership into account, I think I would feel safest with Chandler. But yeah,
Green Bay can't stop the run, right?
Yeah, like it's a really good spot for Chuba, and those numbers for Singletary are crazy. So for tournaments, it's might be a pretty good idea to get off Chandler. I know that those other guys will carry some ownership, but I don't think it's going to be close to what Ty Chandler's will be. Yeah, I do you have a strong lean for one of these guys?
I think mine's. I like kind of. It's weird because I like all 3, but I can't get away from Chandler. I do like him, but I think mine is Chuba Hubbard. I know this offense is horrible, but he has 92 yards in each of the last 4 games. He has 93 touches the last 4 games. Like he's just heavily involved. 24 touches last week, 103 yards. Green Bay's allowing 5.1 yards per carry the last 6 weeks with 6 rush touchdowns allowed. I think the matchup's good. I just you hate to play anyone in this offense, but I think that he's just going to get. I think 20 plus touches are pretty much locked in if he stays healthy all game. And 5,700 on a nice kind of pivot from a guy who's going to be uber popular right below him. I think works really well. I do like Chuba Hubbard a lot this week.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, if he got 20 plus, keeps getting 22, 25, 23 carry, like that's just so good for that salary.
If he can find a way to score, like it almost automatically works with 20 touches.
Yep. You could just live in that 5K range, this week.
I think building with two of these guys works too. Like there's a lot of different ways to go, and that kind of leads me into receiver. Let's jump over there. But first, note from our sponsors at Splash Sports. RotoWire is proud to partner with Splash Sports for the 2023 fantasy football season. Splash Sports empowers gaming commissioners to earn by creating contests. Commissioners can set up contests, add their style, and enjoy the evolving Splash Sports platform for customized preferences. From daily to season-long contests, Splash Sports caters to various playing styles such as DFS, Pick X, and traditional Survivor. And unlike traditional sportsbooks, Splash Sports pits you against friends and family, not the house. Splash goes beyond betting, a space where friends can connect, strategize, and share in the excitement of sports. RotoWire will be running weekly DFS tiers contests on Splash Sports all season long. Can you beat the RotoWire experts? Visit rotowire.com/splash to enter today. So we've kind of hit the two expensive running backs, but I'll recap here. We got Tyreek Hill's 9,600, CeeDee Lamb's 9,200, Amon-Ra 8,200, Justin Jefferson 8,100. I think we've kind of broken down all four of these guys already. I want to talk about Jefferson real quick, though. He was not 7 of 84 last week and 10 targets. Like the yards per target was not very good. There's a little bit of Nick Mullins in there, but we talked about before. He'll chuck it around. I think he's gonna make some mistakes, but you want a quarterback that's gonna force the ball in your receiver. 10 targets, I think, was a really good sign for Jefferson. Looks fully healthy. Great matchup too. Wide receiver ones have done really well against Detroit. I think I like Amon-Ra and Jefferson almost as much as the top two guys this week, which sounds kind of crazy, but I think I do.
Yeah, I do too. And I think most people will think that, they're both 1K or more cheaper than these two top guys. It's why I'm trying to talk myself into Tyreek Hill. He's going to be less popular than CeeDee and way less popular than Jefferson and Amon-Ra as well. You just never get that opportunity with Tyreek. He's always been the most popular receiver in the expensive range basically every week. So like just for that reason, I'm trying to talk myself into it, but it's tough. Like if you're just looking at those price tags in a vacuum without considering other stuff, clearly Jefferson and Amon-Ra are better plays,
Dallas plays a lot of man-to-man defense, and Tyreek absolutely murders man defense. So that is, if you wanted to get there, you got the injury, kind of you could tweak something again, risk, but if Dallas is going to stick with that man defense, maybe they switch it up. I don't think you can guard Tyreek Hill man-to-man flat out.
Nope, me either. The Jefferson, it worries me a little that Addison had such a big game last week. Hawkinson can always be involved.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Jefferson's going to be the most popular of these expensive receivers. Okay. So he's a good play. I'm just trying to.
How popular is Amon-Ra, you think?
I think half as popular as Jefferson.
Okay. Yeah, I think Jefferson just
good leverage.
Jefferson 1,500 less than the most expensive receiver, something you don't really see very often. He's always the top guy. I think I agree there.
And part of it is people are going to play Mullins, so that's just going to drag Jefferson along, and his ownership is going to climb because of Mullins.
And it's easy to play him because Mullins is so cheap.
Right.
The 7,000s it was a big range the last couple weeks, kind of a down range this week. We have Jalen Waddle, 7,800 off the big game. We talked about last week. Like if Tyreek hits, Waddle becomes really interesting. He was really good. He has a 37% target share with no Hill on the field, 24% with Hill on the field. Like it's vastly different. Mike Evans, 7,600, had the touchdown last week. We talked about Baker maybe being a play earlier, so that works there. Michael Pittman, 7,400, really looked really good, has been huge, target monster, was looking really good before he injured last week. Obviously, he can clear the concussion protocol. I can talk. I think it helps a little bit. They played Saturday, gives them an extra day. I think that helps a lot there. These three guys are in the 7,000s. Do you see yourself playing any of the three?
I'm not going to play Waddle. Not that his salary's at a season high point now. And you mentioned he just hasn't had big games with Tyreek. I think they're few and far between.
That was the big touchdown last week was his first catch over 35 yards all season long, which is crazy to me in that offense.
Did you see that clip of McDaniels like calling it out before
No,
it
that's
happened
awesome.
on the sideline? It's a great soundbite of McDaniels on the sideline.
I love McDaniel. He's so fun.
Yeah, he is. He's great. He's talking about like it's going to be a one-play drive right here. Waddle's he calls out everything, and then it just happens exactly like it. Yeah, I'm
gonna check that. I'm gonna check that. I haven't watched the Hard Knocks from this week, but I gotta check that out.
Yeah, Pittman. I like Pittman, but I think he's going to end up being pretty popular, so I could fade him for that reason. I also think usually it's kind of a tough matchup for number ones against Terrell on the Falcons. Pittman's just been getting so many targets though, and he gets so many sort of easy-ish short targets that really add up to fantasy points in PPR based scoring. So yeah, I understand why Pittman projects so well. I might just fade him if he's going to be popular. No one's going to play Mike Evans. I think that's a good tournament play. I could get there if I played Baker. But yeah, right below that, do have a lot of interest in DJ Moore at 6,900.
Yeah, I think Moore is going to be really popular. She's 900. Arizona struggles against wide receivers all year long. Moore was a little bit quiet last week, but like if you're going to give me a quiet game, which still has 8 targets, I think that's golden. That was against Cleveland. I think DJ Moore is easily the best guy in this range for me, 6,900. We've got DK at 6,700. We have Amari Cooper off the big game at 64. We got Calvin Ridley, who kind of I think would be interesting at 1,600, except the fact that Lawrence is probably not going to play, and I just don't think I want to play anybody with Beathard, to be honest. But Ridley had 12 targets last week. They were super inefficient, but 12 targets for the talented guy is always good. Godwin, 12 targets, 155 last week. I did not think we're going to get a 150-yard game from Chris Godwin this season. He's 6,200. He had not been a top 30 wide receiver in like 6 weeks before that. And you got Addison down here. You got DeAndre Hopkins. Who do you like in the 6,000s outside of the DJ Moore? Kind of obvious. I think we both really like that
play. Yeah, I really like DJ Moore. Like Amari Cooper. We mentioned
me too.
Flacco and Cooper. I don't think Cooper's going to be that popular, and he can put up a ceiling in this spot. Godwin. Godwin, it was funny because people didn't think he was going to play. Like he didn't practice all week, and that was one of those that you had to wait to see if he was active. I
sat him in a couple leagues. It was not a good feeling.
Yeah, and then he goes off for 10 for 155 or whatever it was.
Every time I looked up or flipped on the game in Lambeau, he was making a catch. It was quite infuriating. But I like Chris Godwin. It was good to see, but like it was frustrating that I finally benched him.
Very frustrating. I think he's a pretty good option this week because I don't think he'll be that popular. So I think if somebody wanted to go
last week, he had 11 targets the week before too. So he has 23 targets last 2 weeks. It seems like they last couple weeks are making a point to get him some targets.
Yeah, and it's a pretty good spot for one of these Bucks to have a good game if Beathard is in there.
Just like get if CJ can just get to like 7, not even like 14, 17 points, like it could be. I think the Tampa guys are gonna be really good.
Yes, me too. DK, I think he'll get forgotten about. I just don't think I can get there. I don't know. You have any thoughts on that?
I just think it's a hell of a matchup. Detroit has really struggled against wide receiver ones and outside receivers. And he's targeted much higher with Geno than with Locke. The stats look good there. I really like DK this week too. I always like DK. I'm a DK guy. I think that he's a really, really interesting pivot to Moore because I think Moore is going to be way, way more popular. And I think that DK is quietly in a really good setup here. And he's expensive enough where I don't think people will really click him. He was kind of dull last week, had 70 yards, but no touchdowns. I think people are going to like Amari Moore and DJ Moore. That sounded good. But yeah, I really like DK this week. I think that I'm going to play him in some lineups too.
I think it makes all the sense in the world because no one else is really going to play him. He was big on that game-winning drive.
He was that catch on the sideline was a crazy good throw by Locke too.
Yep.
What about in the 5,000s? Usually I like this range. I really don't this week. Garrett Wilson's here, 5,800. Josh Downs, maybe if Pittman misses, but he's not that cheap. If Pittman misses, I think that'd be a pretty big play. Romeo Doubs, if Watson and Reed sit, but he hasn't topped 100 yards all year, 75 yards once. Like he has to score to work. Only had 3 targets last week. Noah Brown down here too. If Nico Collins is out, he had 11 targets from Case Keenum last week. And then the one that's interesting to me, and I want to hear your thoughts. Drake London is kind of this whole Atlanta offense all over the place. London was awesome 2 weeks ago. horrible last week. 2 for 24, only 3 targets. How he gets 3 targets in the game. I know it was raining. I know the weather was bad, but like, come on, that's just bad. That's just bad decision making right there by everybody involved. Taylor Heineke's probably better for him than Desmond Ridder. I think London's probably my favorite guy in here. I like a little low at no Brown if Collins is out, but what are you doing in the 5s? Because I wasn't super fired up about this range at all.
I'm not super fired up about it either, but I think London is my favorite guy as well. I remember McLaurin had a few big games with Heineke as his quarterback. So I think London can do that for 5,100 for sure. I tried it with Romeo Doubs last week. I thought
you did too.
I thought he was a great GPP play because Reed was just going to be massive chalk. And yeah, like you said, he got 3 targets. Like I couldn't believe that without Watson out or without Watson in there and running backs banged up, still no Musgrave. Like, yeah, that was disheartening. I don't know if I could maybe go back to him if Watson and Reed were both out, but again, we talked about this spot against Carolina. It just hasn't led to big games for quarterbacks and receivers too often. Nico Collins, he said he's good to go. Probably takes me off of Noah Brown, but I guess I still get it with Brown. Maybe it doesn't.
Since we're in this range, question in the chat. Someone's looking for a placement for Keenan Allen. Would you go Jaden Reed? No, I don't think he's going to play. Curtis Samuel, Romeo Doubs, or is it Doubs or Dobbs? I always mess that up.
I think it's Dobbs, but I go back and forth because I hear everyone else like.
I think it's Romeo Dobbs, or pick up Noah Brown. Do you have a strong feeling in that group?
Well, if Jaden Reed's active, I would play Jaden Reed.
I fully agreed. I don't think he's gonna be active, but I would fully agree there. If he's not, I think I'm going Noah Brown of that range. But you know what? I'm going Curtis Samuel in that range. I think the targets are there. It's a tough matchup against the Jets, but I think I'm going Curtis Samuel in that range. I take it back.
Man, if Watson and Reed are out, I would have to take another chance on Dobbs. I'd have to do it. Speaking of Reed, though, for DFS, I know we'll have to wait on this news today, but it's only Thursday. Reed projects as the best play in the 5K range, and he did it for people last week as chalk. And if he ends up active, I think he's going to be popular again. I think it's a fine play for cash games, but that's chalk that I could get off in tournaments.
Yeah, I think you're right. If Reed plays, he's the guy in this range. I kind of have the impression that he's not going to, but yeah, if he does, at 5,400, he's pretty solid there. Real quick here, we've gone a little bit long on some of these guys, but under 5,000, there are 2 plays I am most interested in this week, but I'm gonna let you start under 5,000. We just mentioned Curtis Samuel; he's 4,800, playing well. But who do you like down here in this range?
I kind of like JSN for 4,500.
Hell of a catch to win the game last week, by the way. That was a great play.
That was awesome. Yeah, hell of a catch to win the game.
I would wish he get fully unleashed, but I think he's just really good.
Me too. So I think good spot for him. Dontavian Wicks for 4,300.
That was one of my 2 right there.
6 for 97 last week. We just talked about all the Packers injuries. That's the guy. If Watson and Reed are out, I think Wicks would gain some steam, and rightfully so. Going a little bit cheaper. Is it PJ Watt? No, that's
Parker.
The basketball player.
Parker
Washington. Washington, the 6th rounder, rookie 6th rounder on Jacksonville. I think he's decent value. And then you mention every week Jonathan Mingo, but they continue to try to get Mingo involved. He's a talented rookie. He's only 3,600. It's a pretty good matchup. Bad Packers defense in which Jair Alexander just refuses to even play anymore, even though he's probably healthy. So, yeah, I don't mind taking a chance on Mingo. Who stands out for you?
So Wicks was 1. He's 4,300. If Watson and Reed sit, I think I'm just going to have to play him. He looked really good last week. 13 targets last 2 weeks. I can always get behind Mingo, 5+ targets in 6 straight games. But my guy down here this week, 3,700. It is finally time to unleash him. It's Jameson Williams at 3,700 against Minnesota. Career high 7 targets last week. But most importantly to me, he ran 72% of routes on 72% of the pass plays. Played more than Josh Reynolds for the first time all year. The price is right. The talent is right. He's 3,700. If he doesn't do a lot, he doesn't kill you. But, man, I think this is a huge upside play. I think he's playing more. I think he's fully healthy. They know they need explosive plays. They're going to integrate him in there as they're kind of trying to figure out the playoffs. Love Jameson Williams this week. 3,700. Going to hit a big play and going to really be good this week at the price.
Thank you. I needed that. I really needed that because
indoors, high scoring game, cheap part of this game. I don't think he's going to be, there'll be people on him, but I don't think he's going to be very popular at all anyway. I love him as a play this week. I think the price is just perfect for this week.
Yep, me too, because I think it's going to end up being Mingo and Washington, as they're not like they're going to be the most popular, at least as news stands now, of the 3K guys. And I just love that Williams is sandwiched right in between them.
I do too. I just like the fact he's playing more. If you give me Jameson Williams on the field a lot at 3,700, it's just a play for me.
Yes.
It may not work, but man, he's just so explosive. Anytime he touches the ball, it can be a touchdown. I love it.
Great call.
Tight ends. We've kind of, as we've broken down every game, so we talked about them. But Laporta, Hawkinson, and McBride, and I guess Evan Ingram are kind of on this first tier. Njoku's right there, but Laporta 6,400, Hawkinson's 5,800, McBride 5,700. I'll separate those three. I think from what we said before that we both like Trey McBride the most. I think he's the focus of that offense. The Niners are really good against tight ends, and he killed them. He had 10 catches, 102 yards, 11 targets. Seemed like he was open freaking every play. Early on, I was like, dude, someone cover Trey McBride before the Niners kind of put some separation there. Chicago struggled with tight ends. I just think he's the guy in this offense for Kyler right now.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I got off him last week because of the matchup against.
I take full fault for that. You asked me about it. I said they're great against tight ends, and they weren't.
Yeah, no, that's all right. Trey McBride is he's just as much of a wide receiver. I mean, honestly, you watch him out there, he's got some similar qualities that young Gronkowski had and that Travis Kelce has. Like, he just looks like one of those types of tight ends, and it's a pretty good matchup against Chicago. Love Trey McBride. I would have interest in Evan Ingram if Trevor Lawrence played, but not with Beathard. Ingram, I would expect him to pick up a ton of the slack without Kirk and Jones in there. Yep. But I would need Trevor Lawrence to play. I think Njoku, this is a solid play. I mean, he's got 29 and 27 fantasy points in his last two games. He caught 10 of 14 targets last week. Another one of those tight ends with big upside. I mentioned a little bit, it's going to make Laporta go pretty much unowned because he's 6,400. So that's a pretty good tournament play. There's a lot of tight end options. Like Hawkinson's similar. Hawkinson is not going to be nearly as owned as Trey McBride. So I think he's an interesting pivot off of Jefferson in tournaments. Jake Ferguson, I really like because there's about 6 tight ends that are going to be more popular than Ferguson. He's been really good, seeing a lot of targets. So I have an interest in a few of these guys. I didn't even mention Cole Kmet. I have interest in Cole Kmet too, just because he's not going to be as popular as these guys. You see him with big games for 4,400 sometimes.
I agree. It's one of those weird weeks where there's like 6 tight ends above like 4,400 where I could play. And I just think that you can mix and match them. You can figure out how you want. But I think it's a week where I'm going to pay a little bit for my tight end. I think there's value elsewhere that I'm going to do it on. Probably for me, it's McBride and Ferguson are probably my top 2. Again, you give me a cheap part of this Cowboys Dolphins game. I find it hard to figure out exactly how to play it. And you can give me cheap pieces. I think that I like that as a way to go. You're right though. I think Laporta and Hawkinson, no one's gonna have those guys. The interesting stack to me would be Goff, Laporta, Jameson Williams, and you fade Amon-Ra and kind of go it that way and hope Detroit hits big, but Amon-Ra doesn't hit big. I think it's an interesting way to do that. You can afford Jefferson if you did that too. So it's an interesting way to play that game too. I don't really love the cheap tight ends this week. I think Tucker Kraft at 3,700 is probably the best one down here. He just plays a lot. That assuming that Luke Musgrave does not come back. I don't think he's going to this week. 4 for 64, 4 for 57, a touchdown the last 2 weeks. Like, that's a pretty good line for someone in the 3,000s. We talked about Okonkwo. He's just kind of always there, but he was kind of dull last week. 3 for 36, hasn't scored all year. I think this is a week that I'm actually paying 4,900 or up. I get Kmet too, but 4,400 or up for my tight end. I think it's a week where I'm going to pay for it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think you're exactly right too. I think.
Do you like any of the? Is there any like punt tight end if you need some money down here? Is there anybody we talked about? If you want to play the Dallas Miami expensive guys, is there anybody down in the cheap range you give to people that you think kind of works at the cheap range? Because I don't really have one below Kraft. You could go with Okonkwo or Tyler Conklin, but
not really exciting. No, like, I think it's kind of a losing play this week. There's just too many of those guys above 4,900
Yep.
where one of them is gonna put up a ceiling. Like, if you played Okonkwo, last week, you got crushed by all the tight ends that went
Yeah.
off. You had no chance. Even, like, Kraft had a good like, 4 for 60 and a touchdown, but you needed the other tight ends that put up 25 plus.
Yep.
So yeah, I agree with you. Like on a week where, there isn't McCaffrey, there isn't Josh Allen, there isn't Jalen Hurts. Like we don't really need a punt tight end that's going to get us,
Agreed.
7 or 8 points. You want one of those ceilings, like you said, 4,900 and above. Yeah, I'm going to try to do that too.
If I had to go punt tight end and someone needs it in their spot, I'd go Noah Fant at 2,900 would be the one I'd play.
Oh yeah, that's a good call.
I mean, he's not great, but he's active and involved. He's had 13 catches last 2 weeks, and he can hit a big play. He's that kind of guy. Again, I don't want to do it, but if I had to do it, if people need a punt tight end, 2,900 Noah Fant would be where I went.
Okay.
Again, probably not doing it. Defense, real quick. This is an interesting defense week because there are a lot of cheap, appealing plays. We have so many quarterbacks that are out. There's like 4 defenses under 3,500 that I like this week. Who do you like best? And we'll kind of see if we align there.
Jets, I think, are a really good option at home. I think they're going to be very popular for 3,100 against Washington.
They kind of jump off the page at 3,100.
Yes, they do. I think if Beathard ends up starting, you could go to $2,600 Tampa Bay for sure.
That's 2 of my 3 right there. You got 2 that I like.
Yeah, I'll save the third one for you.
So there's a team under 3,000 that had in the last 4 weeks has 12 sacks and 17 turnovers forced.
What? 17?
17. Chicago Bears, 2,800 against Arizona. Arizona's allowed multiple sacks in every game since week 5. The Bears defense is playing really well. You mentioned earlier, you made a good point. The Bears have been really a different team in the last month. And it's one of those things that I think the defense is part of the reason. They're forcing turnovers. I couldn't believe how many turnovers they forced if you look at it in the last 4 weeks. So against Cleveland, they had a fumble and 3 interceptions. Against Detroit, they had a fumble and 2 interceptions. Against Minnesota, that Dobbs game, they had 2 fumbles and 4 interceptions. And against Detroit, it was the Goff 3 turnover game. They had a 4 turnover game. He had fumble himself and 3 interceptions. So that's 17 turnovers last 4 weeks. I could not believe the stat when I looked at it. They had won the 3 weeks prior to that. So there's obviously some flukiness in there. There's some fumbles, but they're forcing guys to turn the ball over. I mean, that Dobbs game and the Goff game, we remember that one. Goff had 2 interceptions against them again. They're ball hawking right now. Some of that is fluky, and I do get that. You get tip balls, you get fumbles, but they give me that many turnovers in 4 weeks. There's something to that. And the problem with Kyler is he just kind of tucks it down and runs, but Arizona gives up a lot of sacks. The Bears will get there. Maybe you get a turnover. I don't think anybody's gonna play him. I think people will have the Jets or Tampa. I think if Beathard starts, Tampa will be pretty popular at 2,600.
Yeah, that's a great call in Chicago, though. I don't think it hasn't all been fluky either. Montez Sweat has been amazing since they traded for him. Looks like one of the best defensive ends in the league. And then Jalen Johnson is one of the best cornerbacks in the league, too. A shutdown guy. He's been great. Yeah, that's a really good call because the Jets and the Bucks will be the most popular.
Yeah. The problem there is they're probably after last week they ran the ball so well, they're probably going to want to run the ball a bunch. But if the Bears can score a little bit, I think they can against Arizona's defense. You make Kyler throw the ball a little bit. I think that he threw a pick 6 last week to Mooney Ward, and I like the Bears. So I think the Jets, the Bears, and Tampa all are really good options. We talked about like not needing to punt at tight end this week. I think it's another option here that you're going to play a cheap defense. Like I just don't think the expensive defenses work. You can play the Packers. But like we said with Carolina, they just kind of muck it up. Like they're not going to let Bryce Young throw a ball, make a lot of mistakes, and they're 3,900. I mean, anybody against Carolina, you think that works, but like I think I like these other defenses more.
Yeah, me too, definitely. And I have a problem paying for the highest or for the most expensive defense when they're on the road. I mean, I know it's a fine matchup against Carolina, but it's just I don't know, makes it easier for me. Give me a cheaper home defense,
Yeah. And I think like if you wanted to spend a little bit more, I think that Cleveland makes a little sense at 3,400 if Case Keenum plays, which he looks like he's going to. He'll force some balls in there too. I think the Browns defense always can get there, but Yeah, Jets, Bears, Bucks, 31, 28, 2,600. And we talked about the Jets. You mentioned they're going to be popular. They made 8 sacks the last 2 weeks. We talked about many times here Washington gets sacked a ton. They could turn it over. Sam Howell got benched last week. Like, it was ugly in Washington. It's getting uglier. I think the Jets D probably lets out some frustration this week on the Commanders too.
Yep, I agree.
I feel like for a 9-game slate, we've hit it all. There's a lot. It's an interesting slate to me. I was surprised when I opened it up how many different ways there are to go on a 9-game slate. It was a tougher slate than I thought it'd be, but I think that leads itself to a lot of different builds, and there's a lot of different ways to go. And hopefully we laid that out for everybody. Anything else on your mind, Ryan, before we jump out of here?
Not specifically, but just in general, I think you made a lot of great points about guys that are going to be low owned where you can get off the chalk. Right, running back you mentioned, at receiver. I think the ownership always condenses around a few guys, and that's going to happen again. And this is a slate where these guys that aren't going to be played are basically, the same options. You're not giving up too much by playing one of these lower owned guys.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up Metcalf, because I think that's a really good one off DJ Moore. I'd love DJ Moore, but like, you play Metcalf for, I don't know, a quarter of the ownership at the same, even at a lesser price. I think that works out really well too. We mentioned the running backs to go with Chandler. There's a lot of different ways to build this week. It's kind of a fun setup, and you can eschew Rashad White and Chandler. Like we said, play 2 guys in the 6s. We mentioned some guys we like there. There's a lot of different ways to get different this week, which is harder to do on a smaller state, but there's a lot of ways this week to do it.
Yes, makes it a fun slate.
It kind of is. I was surprised how much I liked it based on when I first looked at it. Oh my God, it's going to be, the 2 high scoring games kind of be easy. But I think that Cowboys Dolphins being a little bit harder to stack than I first thought it would kind of opens up a lot of things.
Yep, good point.
So we thank everybody for listening. More than anything, thank everybody for listening all season long. We've really enjoyed doing it. We've got a couple of weeks of regular season left, but happy holidays to everybody. We will not be back at you before the holidays. So we do wish everybody a happy holidays, whatever you may celebrate. We'll be back at you next Friday talking about another slate, but hope everybody has a really good week 16. Take care. Hope everyone's wins a bunch of money for the holidays this weekend.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. Good luck, everybody.